The galaxy was old long before humanity took its first steps into the void. Civilizations that had risen from oceans, deserts, and skies had already built an intricate web of power and authority. At the center of this stood the Galactic Council, a coalition of the eldest and most influential species. They called themselves guardians of stability, architects of progress, and arbiters of law. But beneath the polished speeches and gilded halls lay an unshakable arrogance. For ages, they had dictated the rhythm of the stars, confident that no new species could challenge their place. Every newcomer was treated the same, welcomed with smiles, bound with treaties, and pressed into submission. Humanity would be no exception, or so they believed. When humanity's first faster-than-light ship emerged from the cold dark, it did not do so with fanfare. To the Council, it was another primitive race stumbling forward, another culture destined to be a footnote in their grand history. The initial contact was cordial, even ceremonial. The Council praised the achievement, applauded the bravery of explorers, and spoke of unity. Yet behind the pleasantries, they had already written humanity's future. In their eyes, Earth would become a minor client state, a junior partner given scraps of trade and denied any real voice. They had seen thousands of species follow that path, and they assumed humanity would gladly do the same. But arrogance clouded their judgment. The Council looked at Earth through the lens of superiority. They saw a small planet, scarred by wars and internal conflicts, with technology barely adequate compared to millennia-old empires. They catalogued humanity's biology: bipedal predators with fragile bodies, high metabolism, and short lifespans. To them, this was a weakness, a sign of instability. What they failed to see was the thread that connected those very traits into something far more dangerous. When humans were granted a place within the council chambers, it was a token gesture. Delegates from Earth were seated at the margins, given little time to speak and even less to influence policy. Discussions about trade routes, defense initiatives, and colonization rights moved forward without human input. Laws were drafted that restricted the number of systems humanity could colonize. Taxes were imposed on the smallest shipments. Licensing fees strangled new ventures before they could breathe. Each regulation was crafted with one goal in mind: to keep humanity dependent, contained, and manageable. And yet humans listened. They watched the counselors congratulate themselves, watched how other species bent under pressure, and took note of the patterns of power. The arrogance of the elder races blinded them to this quiet observation. To the council, humanity's silence was submission. To humanity, it was the gathering of knowledge. Reports of Earth's entry into the galactic stage spread across the stars, and the reactions of other species mirrored that of the council. Some laughed openly at the humans, calling them short-lived and excitable. Others shook their heads at the prospect of another loud, warlike race being corralled by bureaucracy. Merchants whispered that humanity would soon be stripped of resources, their colonies auctioned to richer powers. Even sympathetic species advised patience, telling human envoys that resistance was pointless against the established order. The council was not just political, it was psychological. Every newcomer was tested through humiliation, presented with challenges designed to remind them of their place. For humans, it began with the trade agreements. Earth was forced to buy fuel and supplies at inflated costs, while selling raw materials at a fraction of their value. Colonies were denied permits to settle fertile worlds, instead redirected toward barren rocks that other species had abandoned. Human starships were seized under accusations of illegal navigation, their crews fined and shamed. Each incident was meant to condition compliance, to break pride before it could harden into defiance. But humanity had endured humiliation before. The Council did not understand that Earth's history was one of survival through constant pressure. For every empire that had sought to dominate humanity's past, resistance had become a matter of identity. Every blockade, every restriction, every insult whispered in those grand chambers was not a chain, but a reminder. The Council believed they were training humanity to kneel. In reality, they were giving it reason to rise. In those early years, humans learned more about their adversaries than the Council realized. They learned which species voted for profit, which for fear, and which for appearances. They learned which fleets were outdated, which worlds were poorly defended, and which empires depended on fragile supply chains. While the Council dismissed Earth as insignificant, the insignificant took notes. Knowledge, after all, had always been the sharpest weapon of survival. Thus began humanity's first steps into a galaxy that neither welcomed nor feared them. To the Council, they were pawns. To humanity, this was nothing new. The stage had been set, the roles assigned, and the script written long before Earth arrived. But the Council had forgotten one truth. Scripts can be rewritten. Predators do not follow orders. They wait, they adapt, and when the moment comes, they strike. The mask of civility slipped quickly once humanity began expanding beyond its cradle. What had been framed as cooperation revealed itself as domination. Every treaty signed was twisted into a trap, every agreement a leash disguised as partnership. The Galactic Council pressed its advantage with the practiced ease of predators who believed they had no equals. But this time their prey was not so easily broken. Trade became the first weapon. Shipments of human goods were intercepted on technicalities invented on the spot. Agricultural exports from Earth were deemed biologically hazardous, forcing colonies to purchase overpriced alien substitutes. Medical supplies critical to fledgling settlements were delayed under endless inspections, leaving colonists to suffer while bureaucrats shrugged. Energy markets were manipulated to ensure that human stations paid twice what older civilizations paid for the same fuel. And when complaints reached the Council, they were met with polite dismissal and veiled mockery. The bullying extended beyond economics. Human colonies applying for new territory were shuffled to the bottom of every list. Fertile worlds near safe routes were auctioned to older species, while humanity was offered barren planets on the galactic fringes. Colonists who managed to survive these hardships were accused of environmental violations whenever they succeeded in making their new homes livable. Ships were seized, captains fined, and fleets delayed by endless litigation. In the Council's mind, this would teach humanity humility. Instead, it taught them caution, patience, and anger. Propaganda followed close behind policy. Broadcasts across the networks portrayed humanity as reckless and violent, a danger to stability. Histories were rewritten to emphasize Earth's wars while ignoring its achievements. Alien commentators laughed that humans could not go a century without conflict. When humans protested, their objections were dismissed as proof of volatility. The smear campaign ensured that when other species looked at humans, they did not see explorers or partners. They saw savages dressed in starships. The Council understood the psychology of submission, or at least they thought they did. They believed that humiliation would fracture unity, that division would sap willpower. They had broken other species this way, and those lessons had calcified into arrogance. But humanity reacted differently. Each insult did not fracture but fused resolve tighter. Each humiliation did not sow doubt but sharpened memory. Where others bent under shame, humanity carried it as fuel. The Council did not realize that every act of condescension became a nail in the coffin of their own authority. In private, councilors sneered at the stubbornness of Earth. They called it immaturity, a refusal to accept the natural order. But their contempt blinded them. They measured strength only in fleets, wealth, and centuries of experience. They did not see that human strength was forged from scarcity, endurance, and the ability to adapt when all odds were stacked against survival. Frustration rippled through human colonies, but leadership resisted rash moves. Instead of meeting hostility with open defiance, they observed. Traders mapped routes that bypassed the Council's checkpoints. Engineers learned to build with less, developing technologies that required fewer imports. Colonists adapted to hostile environments, turning wastelands into settlements the Council had written off as impossible. Every obstacle imposed by the Council became an education in resilience. Every blockade became a lesson in self-sufficiency. The more humanity was pressed, the less dependent it became. There were moments when the pressure nearly broke through into violence. Council patrols harassed human ships, provoking standoffs that teetered on the edge of war. Captains forced to watch their cargoes confiscated clenched their fists, but discipline held. Each time, Earth absorbed the insult, recording every detail, storing every weakness in silence. To outside observers, this appeared as compliance. In reality, it was patience, the kind of patience predators display before the strike. Whispers circulated among the lesser species. Some began to question whether the council had gone too far. They noticed that, despite constant pressure, humanity did not collapse. Instead, it spread steadily, colonists pushing further into marginal systems, ships appearing where the council least expected them. Quietly, humans solved problems others had long abandoned as unsolvable. Where alien empires saw weakness, shrewder observers began to sense something dangerous stirring beneath the surface. The council ignored those warnings. To them, humanity was still a child race, stubborn but harmless. They believed the leash held firm. They did not notice how thin it had become, nor how sharp the teeth waiting at the other end were growing. They thought they had conditioned obedience, when in truth they had crafted a species ready to resist not with words, but with something far more unsettling, the cold memory of every insult, every injustice, and the unshakable resolve to never forget. The council believed they had humanity measured. They saw short lives, fragile bodies, and a turbulent history as signs of weakness. Yet, in those very traits lay the foundation of something the elder races had long forgotten. Humanity's story was not one of fragile survival but relentless adaptation. Every era on Earth had honed instincts forged in scarcity, conflict, and perseverance. When other species recoiled from hardship, humans leaned into it, turning disadvantage into mastery. From the moment our ancestors walked upright, survival had been a contest against predators, famine, and environment. Cooperative hunting demanded patience and coordination. Harsh climates demanded ingenuity. Wars demanded resilience. Diseases demanded endurance. These struggles did not vanish with the arrival of technology. They became the rhythm of civilization itself. By the time humanity reached the stars, its character was already tempered by thousands of years of relentless trial. That history became invisible armor, misunderstood by those who judged only by surface appearances. The Council's policies, meant to limit growth, instead highlighted human strengths. When trade routes were blocked, humans developed new supply chains through ingenuity and trust. Captains learned to navigate hostile corridors, using smaller, faster vessels that slipped past patrols. Colonists denied access to fertile planets thrived on barren ones, transforming wastelands with techniques others dismissed as futile. These settlements were not temporary footholds but permanent reminders that humans could survive where others failed. Stories began to spread of human ships rescuing stranded convoys the Council ignored, or of colonists who carved thriving outposts from frozen worlds written off as uninhabitable. To many, these tales were curiosities, anecdotes about an eccentric species. But for humanity, they were proof of something deeper, that adversity was not a chain but a crucible. Every obstacle presented by the Council became training for challenges greater than anyone anticipated. What the elder races mistook for recklessness was in truth adaptability. Where their fleets relied on centuries-old doctrines, humanity embraced improvisation. Where their colonies demanded ideal conditions, humans reshaped hostile terrain. Where their bureaucracies required stability, humans thrived in volatility. It was not recklessness, it was the instinct of predators accustomed to surviving when the world turned against them. Patience also became a weapon. Humanity did not lash out in the early years. They endured, learned, and calculated. This endurance was not passivity but focus. Predators do not waste energy striking too soon, they wait until the prey's weakness is certain. The Council failed to see that Earth's silence was not surrender but the calm before inevitable defiance. Every insult recorded, every injustice remembered, every humiliation converted into resolve. Even the psychological campaigns failed to wound as intended. The Council's propaganda painted humans as violent, unstable, and dangerous. Ironically, those accusations became unintentional warnings. Other species began to wonder, if humanity truly was dangerous, why provoke them so endlessly? If humans were unstable, why did they not already collapse under pressure? Curiosity spread alongside suspicion, and small voices began to doubt the wisdom of antagonizing a people who refused to break. Human adaptability was not limited to survival. It extended into strategy, science, and society. Scientists developed hybrid technologies that repurposed alien designs into more efficient systems. Engineers created modular starships that could be repaired and reconfigured far faster than the monolithic vessels of the Council. Soldiers trained in simulations that incorporated unpredictability, learning to fight against doctrines that had not changed in centuries. Every generation of humans carried forward the lessons of scarcity and conflict, applying them in ways that the elder races could neither anticipate nor counter. What the Council mistook for desperation was actually innovation. When they restricted resources, humanity learned efficiency. When they blocked colonization, humanity mastered resilience. When they imposed humiliation, humanity transformed it into unity. Piece by piece, humans were sharpening themselves, not by choice but by necessity. And necessity had always been the true forge of strength. Quietly, humanity's reputation began to shift. Those who had mocked them as savages began to regard them with unease. Traders noticed that human merchants often returned from routes others dared not travel, laden with goods. Soldiers whispered about human vessels that evaded entire fleets with uncanny precision. Colonists told of settlements flourishing in places thought inhospitable. The Council dismissed these as exaggerations, but the whispers spread nonetheless. In their arrogance, the elder species could not comprehend the truth. Humanity had not survived its own history by accident. They had survived because survival was their nature. And in a galaxy that believed stability was permanent, that nature was an anomaly. The Council had tried to crush them under the weight of regulation and ridicule. Instead, it revealed the one truth no decree could erase: humanity was never prey. They were hunters, biding their time, adapting with every move, and preparing for the moment when endurance would no longer be enough. The breaking point arrived when the Council mistook silence for weakness one time too many. Convinced that humanity could be squeezed without resistance, they tightened their grip. Sanctions became blockades, inspections turned into seizures, and entire colonies were threatened with abandonment if Earth did not comply with yet another set of demands. The intention was clear: break resolve completely, and reduce humanity to dependency. Instead, the Council's escalation unlocked the response it had spent years underestimating. The first sign came not in open declarations, but in the quiet collapse of the blockade itself. Human ships, small and fast, began slipping through with precision the Council could not anticipate. Where patrols gathered, supply lines elsewhere were disrupted by cyber interference traced back to human systems. Weapons failed to fire, coordinates scrambled, and command networks jammed. Entire fleets found themselves stranded by disruptions invisible to them but orchestrated with deliberate care. The same species mocked as primitive now wielded digital warfare in ways the ancient empires had never prepared to face. Skirmishes followed, sharp and surgical. Human vessels did not seek grand battles. They struck like knives in the dark. A convoy guarded by Council cruisers vanished into ambush, its escorts disabled before they realized the fight had begun. A blockade fleet stationed near a human colony awoke to find their supply depots destroyed in coordinated raids. Every strike was precise, every withdrawal calculated. For every human ship lost, 3 enemy vessels were rendered inoperable. The imbalance grew rapidly, and panic spread through fleets that had never tasted such disarray. What made the attacks terrifying was not their strength but their unpredictability. The Council relied on centuries-old doctrines: linear formations, rigid commands, and overwhelming numbers. Humanity refused to play by those rules. They struck from blind angles, feigned retreats, and turned debris fields into ambush points. Strategies borrowed from millennia of asymmetric warfare on Earth now unfolded on a galactic scale. Against opponents accustomed to predictability, this chaos became a weapon sharper than any blade. Colonies long dismissed as fragile outposts revealed themselves as strongholds of defiance. Settlements on barren rocks that the Council had forced humanity to accept now became launch points for counterstrikes. Hidden infrastructure, built quietly under years of oppression, came alive. Supply caches, manufacturing hubs, and orbital defenses emerged seemingly overnight. What had looked like weakness had been preparation. The Council realized too late that every restriction they had imposed had only trained humans to thrive in scarcity, to conceal strength until the moment it was needed. The psychological effect was devastating. Fleets accustomed to obedience faltered under the pressure of unseen enemies. Captains hesitated, unsure if orders could be trusted in networks compromised by human interference. Soldiers whispered that fighting humans was like being hunted by shadows, never knowing when the strike would come. Rumors spread of colonies surviving bombardments that should have leveled them, of ships reappearing after being declared destroyed. Whether true or not, fear magnified the myth. The Council attempted to escalate further, bringing together coalitions of veteran fleets. But unity fractured when defeats mounted. Species that once mocked humanity now hesitated to sacrifice their own forces in battles they could not win. Whispers began within the chambers themselves. Perhaps this conflict had gone too far, perhaps humanity was not the fragile race they had imagined. The arrogance that had fueled their bullying began to erode under the weight of humiliation. For humanity, these victories were not mere revenge but survival. Generations raised under restrictions had prepared for this inevitability, and when the moment arrived, they fought not for conquest but for freedom. Every strike carried the weight of years spent enduring ridicule and exploitation. Every victory was a declaration that patience had ended. The Council had mistaken endurance for submission, adaptability for desperation, silence for fear. Now they confronted the reality hidden all along. They had not been taming prey but provoking predators. Humanity did not roar into dominance with overwhelming numbers or ancient fleets. They rose with precision, with adaptability, and with the unbreakable instinct to strike when survival demanded it. The galaxy, once laughing at the notion of humans as a threat, now watched in alarm as the balance of power shifted before their eyes. The Council that once ruled through intimidation now stood exposed. Their fleets, once symbols of unchallenged power, drifted in ruins along forgotten trade routes. Their sanctions had collapsed into irrelevance, their propaganda discredited by the evidence of human resilience. What they had dismissed as an upstart race had torn apart centuries of assumed dominance in a span so short it left the galaxy stunned. The question was no longer whether humanity could survive, but what role it would claim in a future that had been irrevocably rewritten. Peace was not offered out of goodwill, but out of necessity. Defeats accumulated too quickly, and allies once eager to enforce council decrees began refusing to commit their own resources. To them, humanity was no longer a nuisance but a force better treated as an equal than an enemy. Negotiators who had once spoken to human representatives with derision now arrived in silence, their voices measured, their words chosen with care. The arrogance that once filled the council chamber gave way to unease. Humanity had forced the galaxy's most powerful empires into the one position they had sworn never to accept: recognition of limits. Yet humanity did not answer with conquest. There were no declarations of empire, no demands for tribute, no fleets sent to subjugate the worlds that had mocked them. Instead, the response was simple: sovereignty, respect, and the right to exist without chains. This restraint startled many who expected vengeance, but it revealed something more unsettling. Humanity's strength did not come from domination but from survival. They fought not to rule but to ensure they could never again be ruled. That difference marked them as something distinct, something other species had long forgotten was possible. In the wake of their defiance, alliances shifted. Minor species once cowed by the council began to seek human contact, quietly offering trade, knowledge, and friendship. To them, humanity represented proof that resistance was possible, that even the mightiest powers could be challenged. Where the council had spread fear, Earth inspired a different kind of contagion: hope. The myth of human tenacity spread faster than any fleet, retold in markets, colonies, and outposts. Humanity had endured pressure designed to break it, and in doing so, it had given others the courage to question why they had bent so easily. The council attempted to salvage authority, but its foundation was cracked. Every decree was now measured against the unspoken question: what if the humans refuse? Their reputation as manipulators, bullies, and untouchable arbiters had been shattered. They had underestimated a species that carried within its bones the memory of predators, the instinct to adapt, and the refusal to kneel. The arrogance that once shaped galactic order had collapsed under the weight of its own miscalculation. For humanity, the outcome was more than victory, it was transformation. The same trials meant to suffocate them had revealed their true nature to the galaxy. Earth's voice, once silenced at the margins of the chamber, now carried weight beyond measure. Their message was not one of conquest but of warning. To provoke humanity was to awaken an instinct older than any empire, an instinct sharpened by millennia of survival. That truth was etched into every negotiation, every alliance, every whisper in the halls of power. The galaxy adjusted quickly. No longer were humans the subjects of ridicule. They were measured with the wary respect given to forces that cannot be controlled. Traders remembered how human ships had navigated blockades. Soldiers remembered how human tactics unraveled fleets. Colonists remembered how humans had thrived where others failed. Each memory became a reminder that underestimating Earth carried a cost too steep to pay again. The final irony was lost on no one. The Council had believed it was teaching humanity humility. Instead, it had taught them patience, forged unity, and revealed strength the galaxy had forgotten to fear. In trying to make humans into dependents, they had instead ensured their rise as equals, and in the eyes of many, as exemplars of what survival truly meant. The story of humanity's defiance spread not as propaganda but as lived reality, retold in countless variations, a race that endured every insult, overcame every barrier, and emerged unbroken. The lesson was clear, etched into the consciousness of the galaxy itself. Predators cannot be tamed, and those who mistake endurance for weakness will discover too late that patience is not submission. Humanity had not sought domination, yet domination had been forced to acknowledge them. In the end, the Council's greatest miscalculation was believing it could bully a species that had spent its entire existence enduring worse. Humanity did not become apex predators by choice. It became so by necessity, and in that necessity lay the truth the galaxy would never forget.